AEW has a big problem on its hands. The Elite pushed CM Punk out the door, and now this Elite can't draw a dime. Hi, I'm Chris Graham, and talking about AEW Dynamite ratings the last few weeks, they're not good. The 3-week average is at just 856,000, well below the mythical 1 million mark that seems to be the line of demarcation for AEW fans online. And honestly, it's a psychological barrier that has been there for the company since its launch in 2019. The first show back in October of 2019 drew 1.4 million viewers and seemed like, wow, that's the floor. No, that was the ceiling. That's been the highest rating for the company, and that was in week one. And the last few weeks, 856,000, and this week 870,000. And what's interesting there about that is the last 3 weeks have seen the return of the Elite, the Young Bucks and Kenny Omega. Young Bucks, former AEW Tag Team Champions; Kenny Omega, the former World Champion; the Trio, the former Trios Champions. These guys are also executive vice presidents in the company. No surprise that they've booked themselves to win several titles, right? But that's the way wrestling works. It's okay. I'm not criticizing those guys. Other bookers have booked themselves into great situations, dating back to the beginning of pro wrestling as an entity, right? So, but the fact here is that the Young Bucks and Kenny Omega were out for 2 months, and that's why we have to talk about a return with these guys. They were out for a couple of months after the brawl with CM Punk, after All Out, after CM Punk won the world title from John Moxley, and then his infamous, I'll call it another pipe bomb at the media scrum after All Out, in which he called out, not necessarily by name, but you knew exactly who he was talking about. People who'd been sniping about him for months, to the dirt sheets, letting their friends like Dave Meltzer know what their thoughts are, and even getting into a promo or two on live TV to take shots at Punk. And Punk is still out now. Punk is still under contract, as far as we know. The reports are that Punk is still getting paid by AEW. Ostensibly, he did suffer a torn triceps in his title win back at All Out back in early September, and and at the time we were told that could be a 6 to 9 month recovery process, and so Tony Khan may just be paying him on the contract just to keep any potential lawsuits from being making him pay him instead. So. And who knows? There's been talk about contract negotiations, about Punk wanting out of the deal, but Khan is, as far as we know, again, I don't know how much I trust of wrestling reporting, because it's all based on sources who have reasons to give information out, and CM Punk has famously not been very willing, for lots of reasons, and probably mostly, if not entirely, all good reasons, to not deal in the back and forth with wrestling journalists like Meltzer and like others with Wrestling Inc. and other websites. And so you have to take with a grain of salt anything you hear in wrestling news, and especially news of this nature where it is confrontational. So I say all that to preface. Last 3 weeks haven't been good for AEW, and this is with the Elite returning, and the November 23rd match. Now, so the return was formally at Full Gear when they physically made an appearance in the ring on TV, but the Elite were introduced in a graphic as the challengers to the AEW Trios Champs Death Triangle, Pac and the Lucha Brothers. Pac and the Lucha Brothers. I always say Pac, like it's X-Pac. Pac and the Lucha Brothers. They wrestled at Full Gear. There was a fake controversial win for the Death Triangle that was very quickly, too quickly for any logic to dictate. It was spun into, let's turn this into a best of 7 series because Death Triangle cheated. Okay. As if that's not, in the main event, MJF used a foreign object to win the title. There was no best of 7 series with him and John Moxley, but this was a really weak excuse to get the Elite into a featured spot, coming back as soon as they come back from their suspension in the aftermath of All Out. Well, their first match on Dynamite last Wednesday, November 23rd, drew 864,000 viewers for its 9 to 9:15 p.m. segment, according to WrestleNomics. Which is, if you're a nerd like me and you're into data, WrestleNomics is a great. It's $5 a month. It's a great service to get into and kind of get that detailed information on things like ratings, on things like the economics of wrestling, financial reports, and that kind of thing. The staff there does a great job breaking things down. So that 864,000 viewers was 1.8% down from the average of viewers for that episode, 880,000. So the elite match on November 23rd drew well below what the show average did that night. And then this past week's Wednesday's match, November 30th, just a couple nights ago, the first even though the match last week had drawn less than the average for the show and way below what the top quarter hour was for the show. The Elite Death Triangle match this week was booked for the main event, and it bombed. It drew 792,000 viewers, down 9.1% from the average for the show. And so you see the problem here. The Elite won the war. CM Punk is gone. Punk was a big ratings draw. He was a big pay-per-view draw for this company. And the guys who won the battle backstage have no interest. I mean, in fact, if you were watching the show on Wednesday night, again, this is the main event of the show, the Elite Death Triangle. And when both teams came out, the crowd was as flat as I've ever heard a crowd, at least an AEW crowd. WWE crowds are pretty flat and have been for months now. But the first 2 weeks we saw the Elite Death Triangle. The first week, the pay-per-view show, the Full Gear show in New Jersey, the Elite was greeted with a number of FCM Punk chants, a very favorable Elite crowd there. The second show, last week's show, was in Chicago, CM Punk's hometown, and there was a little bit of dueling FCM Punk, F the Elite, a lot more F the Elite, but there's certainly surprisingly were some FCM Punk chants going on there. This week, nothing. There was no crowd response to this match, to the guys coming out. It was a good match. These two teams can put on entertaining matches. The Young Bucks versus the Lucha Brothers last year to Full Gear pay-per-view was the match of the year. It was a heck of a match, and you add Pac and you add Kenny Omega. I mean, these guys can work. It went over like a fart in church, like Jim Cornette would say. So the ratings are down. The crowd doesn't seem interested, and there's a bigger problem here. So you got rid of Punk. Fans like me, I'm a fan in addition to being a journalist, and the fans like me are upset that things went out the way they did with the Elite and Punk. I mean, I'm on Punk's side here. I think that he's right to be upset that for months there was a orchestrated campaign to affect his name in a negative way. Both to the wrestling media, such as it is, and then a few times in promos on TV. And so there's that. And then the bigger issue again is that there's just nothing right now after this pay-per-view. And we're the period between Full Gear and the next pay-per-view, whose name escapes me. I don't even care about names for pay-per-views. It's late February, early March. It's just the way it goes. It's a longer period of time. AEW does 4 pay-per-views a year, and this one has the longest period of time between. It's roughly 3.5 months until the next pay-per-view. And so the build, can be slower as a result of that, but it can't be too slow because right now the show is hemorrhaging ratings. And, you got MJF winning the world title. Great. Who's going to be his next opponent? And Ricky Starks technically is the next opponent. But Ricky Starks is just an opponent. He's not going to be the next, big opponent. That's not going to sell. That's not going to get people buying. That's not, it wouldn't get people buying pay-per-views. It's not going to get people watching Dynamite that night. That's not the match you're watching. The only thing we can hope for is that there's some sort of run-in by somebody else, probably Bryan Danielson. The beatdown that MJF gave to William Regal, where we're hearing reports that Regal is now on his way back to WWE. Regal helped with the brass knucks. He helped MJF win the world title from Jon Moxley at Full Gear. Danielson, last week in a promo noted that Regal was and is a important mentor to him. After the beatdown and the ceremonial we're going to put Regal on a stretcher and put him in an ambulance and send him off. Danielson looked distraught. He actually jumped in the ambulance. So yeah, we're setting up MJF Danielson. That's going to be our pay-per-view late February, early March main event. But that's a ways off. And all we're getting is slight hints towards it now. People need to watch every week. If you're running a weekly show, if you have a weekly promotion, you need people to watch every week, not just once every 4 months, or in this case, 4 months. And so there's nothing compelling at the world title level. The tag team champs, the Acclaimed, got a 60-second promo Wednesday night. There's no readily apparent dance partner for them. Have no idea who that would be. It could be FTR, but it's not going to be. FTR is wrestling singles matches or wrestling trios matches. They're doing everything they can but wrestle tag matches. Makes no sense. So you got two great tag teams you're not doing anything with. It's almost like Tony Khan is intentionally booking them into oblivion for some reason. Pretty much what he did to Wardlow, who he's now trying to make the subject of a reclamation project. Wardlow was white hot after his win over MJF back at Double or Nothing in May. And then the summer was just a summer of nothing for him. Now that he's lost the title to Samoa Joe, his TNT title, I don't think I said that. Now that he's lost his TNT title to Samoa Joe, another big guy, a guy who at the end will put him over, that's going to get Wardlow hopefully back into the hot, part of where he was back in May. I don't know if it'll ever get back to where he was back in May, but it'll get him back in that direction. But outside of those guys, what you got? You can say you got women's division, which hasn't been booked well. There's a lot of talent. There's a ton of talent in AEW, but there's just kind of floating around right now. And in the meantime, the EVPs are booking themselves into main event spots in trios matches that nobody cares about. It's looking more and more like the end to All Out, which was so exquisitely done. CM Punk won the world title from Moxley. It was in his hometown. It was great. MJF surprise return after 3 months off. It all went away with the pipe bomb and the locker room brawl. That was the jump the shark moment for AEW. I think we're on the downslide now of the history of AEW, and that's a shame because wrestling needs a bipolar world where bipolar. No, I don't think I want to say bipolar. A binary solar system kind of world. Yeah, not bipolar. Binary solar system. I knew I was going for two. Superpower world. We need two superpowers here to somebody to counteract WWE, basically, right? Impact had its run in the mid aughts up until about 2009, 2010. And then it's still around, but it's faded way down. AEW seemed to me like it could be the kind of company that could have the legs with the money that Tony Khan has behind him, and his knowledge of how things work in other sports. He's got a background in the NFL. He's got a background in Premier League soccer. He's letting the inmates run the asylum, unfortunately, and that's going to be the downfall. So I hate to say it because I'm a huge AEW fan. If you have any questions, any comments, anything else you want us to cover on the website or on YouTube here, please email me at chris@augustafreepress.com for the latest sports news. Go to augustafreepress.com.